Hi there, I'm going to share a video of my sermon from yesterday. We were, it's on the readings that are suggested for that Sunday, but the readings also just went really well with what we had happening in our congregation, which is that we were welcoming 2 new members. One was transferring from another congregation in the denomination, and the other one is a member of a church overseas, but is able to be a member in association in our church without leaving their home church. So the readings are from Joel 2, 23 to 32, and from Luke's Gospel 18, 9 to 14. Have a read of those, pause the video, have a read of those, and then come back. For a little while this year, we were hearing from the book of Jeremiah, which is from the time when the ancient ancestors of the Jews were at war with their enemies. They were under siege. Their enemies were trying to take over their land. And in the time afterwards, when they'd been beaten and their leaders had been taken away into exile and a lot of people had been left behind in a devastated land, that's what's going on during Jeremiah. A lot of it's not very happy. Today we've heard from a book that comes a bit later, from the book of Joel, and the scholars think that the book of Joel is from after the time when the descendants of those exiles had returned to the land and when they were rebuilding the nation. It's about 400 years before the time of Jesus. And they've had a setback in the rebuilding. Crops have been destroyed by a plague of insects, locusts, and these locusts have been swarming, the locusts have been destroying, the locusts have been cutting, the locusts have been devouring everything that the people have grown. But Joel says that even though they've gone through such a time of devastation, God is going to restore. What they've lost will be replaced. God is going to send rain and make the land productive. And I think there's an acknowledgement here that they don't deserve the misfortune that's been visited on them, because it says they're going to be vindicated. That means that they're going to be shown to be innocent. In other places, the prophets have concluded that when the people have experienced misfortune, it's because they brought it on themselves by going against God. And here, I think there is the assumption that God has done this, that God has sent the plague, but there's also, Joel is saying that God doesn't think it's fair and that God is going to restore because it wasn't fair. It says the rain will make the land productive enough to replace what was lost. Productive enough that there'll be plenty of food and everyone will be able to eat. And Joel also says that something else is going to rain down excessively. God's Spirit. God's Spirit is going to rain down on the people, not just on a few prophets, not just on a few people, on all kinds of people, men and women, young and old, rich and poor. And this weekend we were welcoming new members. I think this scripture is a reminder that we need to be ready to hear from all of our members, because God's Spirit is poured out on all kinds of people. And we need to hear the voices of all kinds of people if we want to see the full picture of what God's saying to us currently. We need to hear the voices of all kinds of people if we want to see the full picture of what God's doing in the world. Otherwise, it's like we're walking around with our ears covered and only one eye open. There's so much that we'll miss if we do it. We might end up going around in circles. We might end up falling in a deep hole. We need to be able to hear what all parts of the church body are sensing about where God's Spirit is leading us. And we need all the members, because our worship can become lopsided if we're worshipping alone. In the gospel reading, Jesus tells a story that demonstrates that. We've been hearing a number of stories from Luke's Gospel where I think Jesus just messes with our thinking. He tells us things that we wouldn't expect to hear that mean we've got to rethink everything. And Jesus has just been talking with his followers about the need to be continuously praying, not giving up hope, even though there's a lot that could discourage us. And now he tells us a strange story about 2 men praying. One of those men is actually a Pharisee, and they're a group of people that had a lot of similarities with the ancient Christians. Like Jesus, the Pharisees had a lot of problems with the way that the priests were running the Jewish temple. And they saw the temple as corrupt. They had more of a focus on what was happening in people's homes and what was happening on people's farms and what people were doing in their businesses. They wanted ordinary people to have clear idea of how to follow God's commands in the home, in ordinary situations, in everyday situations. They were more focused on everyday life than they were on ceremony. So this man and the movement that he's part of, they've got a good reason to be happy with the way that they live. They're doing their best to live good, ethical lives, to live the good life that God has described to them in their scripture, and they're inviting others into that good life as well. But the thing is, when this man goes to the temple, that institution that he sees as just corrupt, when he goes there to pray, he stands and prays there on his own. He's a long way from everyone else, and he thanks God for how good he is, because he doesn't steal, and he's faithful to his wife, and he fasts and he tithes, and he looks around and he sees all these other people. He looks around and he sees the priests, and he thinks, you don't do all these things, you're not good like that. And he's really proud of the life that he lives, but I don't get the sense that he's open to God moving him anywhere. He's convinced that he's made it, but he's on his own in his ethical holiness, and he's trying to stay away from that tax collector. The tax collector is not ethical. His whole society is under occupation from a big foreign power, and this guy is somebody who has joined that occupying force. He's a collaborator. He has the job of collecting tribute for the rulers in Rome, and that's a set amount. If he can collect more than that, he can keep whatever excess there is. So his neighbours have to struggle to pay the tax and to feed themselves. That includes the Pharisee. That Pharisee's having to pay those taxes with the added extras. Meanwhile, the tax collector is able to get rich. He's rich, but he's a collaborator, and most of his neighbours hate him. So he's praying a long way off as well on his own too, opposite corner. And he has a strong sense of how dishonest and unethical his life is when he prays. He asks God for mercy. These two actually need each other. Jesus says that the tax collector is justified because he can see his faults. I think we can assume that the tax collector is going to change, that he's open to God's Spirit moving in his life. Just after this, and we'll hear this next weekend, just after this, Jesus tells a story about a tax collector who changes. He's called Zacchaeus. And we'll be able to see the impact of that next week. Who knows, maybe this is the same tax collector. Maybe this is Zacchaeus praying in the temple. But the Pharisee can't see his own isolation from his neighbour. He's probably got to keep his distance from the tax collector to protect his holiness. But I wonder how things might have been if they prayed together. I know I've had times of feeling like the Pharisee, feeling like I have it all together and the people who don't live like me are no good. And I know I've had times of feeling like the tax collector and feeling like there's nothing good in me. Whichever posture we're in, we need each other. We all need the other members of the church. If we're feeling like we have it all sorted out, we need the fellowship of another member who can teach us humility. When we're feeling like we're useless, we need the fellowship of somebody who can teach us that we can live a good life like God imagined. If we can be together in community and not isolate ourselves, we can help to balance out the things that make us lopsided, and we can live the full life that God has imagined for us.